All right, thanks, Jeff. Let's have some fun here today. It's a great honor to be up here with you. I get to travel all over the world and talk to groups on lots of different topics. It's not that often that I get to stay right here in my own backyard, though. I live in Broomfield, and our office is in Westminster. I run the Da Vinci Institute, and it's set up as a futurist think tank, and so we're constantly looking at new ways of thinking about the future. By the way, we're all going to live in the future, so it's in our best interest to think about it a little bit. Let's start off with talking a little bit about new industries. So every future industry starts as a micro-industry. It starts very tiny. It starts as, one or two businesses just getting off the ground. A lot of them will flame out, but we're going to have tons of new micro-industries coming together over the next couple decades here. So I wrote a column recently on 100,000 new micro-industries that will come to spring to life over the next 2 decades. I think that this is so interesting because right now we have what Chris Anderson, the former managing editor of Wired magazine, refers to as the tools of production. All of this emerging technology is giving us innovative new tools for doing things. And so we're going to have mom and pop businesses crop up in kind of every corner of the world creating new things. And one way I like to explain this is I like to talk about the shoe industry because we can all relate to the shoe industry. Every year, we sell 21 billion pairs of shoes in the world. 21 billion, that's roughly 3 pairs of shoes for every person on the face of the earth. Now, the projections are that within 5 years, that 5% will be smart shoes. Now, naturally, smart shoes mean different things to different people. When I was at CES in January, there was a company selling smart shoes for fall victims, people that would fall down, and it would send out a signal, and it would for somebody to come and help pick them up. In the very near future, though, these smart shoes are going to get much smarter, and we will have smart shoes that will have pores on the side that open and close based on the temperature of your foot to allow more circulation. We'll have expanding polymeric gel packs in the soles of your shoes so that you have an even pressure on the bottom of your foot. We'll have the ability to track every step you take and how you take that step. Lots of information coming from that. And suddenly we're going to have niche shoe industries crop up for people that play lacrosse, or people that are mountain climbers, or people that are left-handed, or people that are amputees, or people that play organ. We're going to have tons of micro-industries crop up out of just the shoe industry itself. And then it's going to get real interesting, because the types of shoes that we come out of the woodwork with are ones that I'm not sure that I would ever wear, but this is the forward and backward shoes here. The duck shoes, the lounge chair shoes. The one on the right has actually got a little canary in it, so the canary in the coal mine shoes, something like that. But if you can imagine, if you're a person that likes to go jogging at night, so you step outside of the house and suddenly your shoes realize that it's dark outside. So your shoes signal for a drone to fly overhead and light up the path in front of you. And because these are smart shoes, they already authorize a payment of $25 an hour to pay for that drone flying overhead. It doesn't just have to be jogging shoes. It can be an umbrella drone that can signal whenever it gets wet outside. See, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. We've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. In fact, all information we come into contact with is essentially history, so the past is very knowable, yet we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of every one of us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others. But people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase quite a bit: the future creates the present. This is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is somehow going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images of the future that we hold in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing. If we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they make decisions today. So that's my promise to you here today. Before we leave this morning, I will change your vision of the future, and as a result, you will walk out of here making slightly different decisions. I get asked a lot if I have a crystal ball. Yes, I do have a crystal ball. It was just sitting around at home, and my wife says, "Why don't you just take this to the office? It's just collecting dust." So I took it and put it in the car, and I was no more than about 4 or 5 minutes down the road, and I looked over and I saw that my crystal ball had started to fire on the seat next to me. Now, this is Colorado, the sun shining in, and the crystal ball is a giant lens. So I had this science experiment going on right next to me in the front seat there. Luckily, I was able to put it out and it didn't cause any serious damage, but then I had this revelation. Obviously, it came from my crystal ball. The revelation is that the newspaper headlines the next day were going to say, "Futurist killed by his own crystal ball." And he didn't see it coming. So that's my disclaimer. I don't see everything. As Larry Page says, the main reasons companies fail is because they miss the future. I happen to agree with that. We're getting blindsided by so much new technology, and it's shifting the ground that we've been walking on, constantly forcing us to do more with less. Now, there's a couple different kinds of innovation. There's disruptive innovation that disrupts existing industry, and then there's catalytic innovation that creates entire new industries. So in the past, examples of catalytic innovation were things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, photographs, sewing machines. All of these went on to create multi-billion, multi-trillion-dollar industries. But here's the thing, all industries are a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yes, all industries end. 1,000 years from now, every industry we have today will have been replaced multiple times. Here's the other key thing to remember, is that the most profitable industries today end up being in the second half of the bell curve, constantly being forced to do more with less. So I love to ask this question: which category of micro-industry will start affecting your profession or your business the soonest? Each of you is coming at it from a slightly different angle here into this event, and so this question will go off in lots of different directions when you think through it. So in 2012, I was giving a talk in Istanbul at a TEDx event. I made the prediction that by 2030, over 2 billion jobs would disappear. Now, I get quoted on this in newspapers, magazines, TV stations, literally all over the world. But this was never intended to be a doom or gloom statement. It was never intended to say that we're going to have 2 billion people unemployed in the world. It was intended to be a wake-up call, letting people know that we're going to have to create new jobs at a faster rate than ever before. This is what I refer to as the level problem. Now, most of us have this tool in our house, our garage. We use it to do carpentry work. We use it to straighten pictures on the wall. But once we download a level app on our smartphone, then a lot of us don't have to buy that tool. That means we don't need to make as many aluminum frames. We don't need to have as many glass bulbs. We don't have to have as many people doing the assembly work, the shipping, the receiving, the retail stores that are handling it. Every time we download a mobile app, we eliminate a piece of a job. It's a very, very tiny piece of a job. But once we start downloading billions upon billions of mobile apps, we're eliminating lots of jobs. The following year, in 2013, Oxford did a study. They looked at 700 different occupations. They concluded that over 47% of today's jobs are going to get automated out of existence. Coincidentally, that works out to 2 billion. So thank you, Oxford. That was nice. But that's not the whole story. We're not automating jobs out of existence. We're automating tasks out of existence. So this is a gentleman here with this exoskeleton that he's wearing. He can actually accomplish 3 times as much work in a day as somebody that's not wearing that. So it's not us versus the robots and us versus AI. It's us with the robots. It's us with AI. Somebody with a toolbox is more valuable than somebody without. Somebody with a robot is more valuable than somebody without. Somebody with AI is more valuable than somebody without. It's another tool for us to work with. So the jobs themselves don't go away. Somebody who, as an example, who is a meter reader and goes out and reads meters, the meter reader job involved much more than just physically going out and reading meters. But once the information starts flowing in wirelessly, the job itself gets redefined. And naturally, it can be done with fewer people, but the job itself doesn't disappear. On one hand, we're eliminating jobs. The other hand, we're freeing up human capital. But just because our jobs disappear doesn't mean we've run out of work to do in the world. I mean, that's fairly preposterous. As long as we have problems, we will always have work to do. We can now think faster, know faster, and do faster than ever before in history. And so where is our next generation jobs going to come from? Well, they're going to come from future industries. Now, when we talk about future industries, I always focus on what I refer to as the disruptive 8. Now, there's actually many more than this. I can get the message across pretty well just by talking about these 8, though. And so I'll touch on these briefly here. First one is the trillion sensor movement. This Dr. Janis Burzek, in 2013, he's a former vice president of Fairchild Semiconductor. He held an event called the Trillion Sensor Summit in 2013. And he brought together a bunch of industry experts, and they were looking at how long it would be before we reached the first trillion sensors in the world. After thinking through it all, they've concluded that we're going to reach the first trillion sensors in the world somewhere around 2022, and that by 2036, we'll have 100 trillion sensors in the world. Now, what this means is that the sensors, which detect everything from light to heat to moisture, actually millions of different things that they can detect, they're going to get very tiny, very ubiquitous, very easy to mass produce, very inexpensive, and we'll start embedding sensors in coatings like paint and powder coating, and we'll paint our walls with it, we'll paint our sides of our cars with it. We'll have sensors embedded in our clothing, we'll have information coming from everywhere. If you look at this little skin patch on the arm, it looks like a little Band-Aid. This is a very sophisticated piece of technology with lots of information coming and going. The first iPhone that came out had 5 sensors in it in 2007. The average smartphone today has over 20 sensors in it, so the number of sensors in smartphones is doubling every 4 years, roughly. So the prediction is that we'll reach the first trillion sensors in the world 2022, and that this will then generate tons of micro industries, sensor installers, sensor data marketplaces, sensor design studios, sensor repair shops, and so much more. The Internet of Things. It was somewhere around 2008 to 2009 that the company Cisco decided that the number of devices connected to the internet started to exceed the number of people on planet Earth. 6.8 billion devices, 6.8 billion people. And they projected out that roughly we're going to reach 25 billion devices next year. So for the past 2 decades, we've been building this digital infrastructure over everything physical in the world. Now, we didn't really have any architecture for this until a blockchain came along. So that's a piece of the equation. It's not the whole thing. But it's also given us different ways of looking at things, too, including this idea of creating circular economies. Now, traditionally, we would create a product and we would make something, we would use it, dispose of it, and that would pollute the world. Now, in a circular economy, we're looking at things slightly differently. When we make something, we use it, we reuse it, we remake it, and recycle it, and try to use it all over again. Try to eliminate all the waste. So the key goal in a circular economy is to try to get to a zero landfill. Zero landfill is really hard to get to, but if we can even get close, that's a huge achievement. So I'll talk about 3 companies just briefly here that are doing some remarkable work. Aramark is a big food service company. They set a goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. Well, they've already made huge strides. And since 2016, they've slashed their food waste by 44%, reducing the amount sent to landfills by 479 tons of wasted food. That's a huge accomplishment. Intel, they set a goal of recycling 90% of non-hazardous waste and to divert 100% of its hazardous waste from landfills by 2020. So they've also made huge progress. They now recycle 75% of waste, and 66% of the hazardous copper waste is now recycled as well. So huge progress there. In the Johnson Controls company, they're making batteries, and their goal was to design conventional automobile batteries so 99% of the materials can be reused. Also making huge strides there. So they now produce batteries with over 80% recycled material. This doesn't apply yet to all of the batteries in the electric cars we're using, but this is a good step in the right direction. So my prediction is that our most valuable land in the future will be our landfills, because that's where we've buried all of our natural resources. And so, in not too long, somebody's going to invent a robotic earthworm to go through and mine out all of these landfills and reclaim all of this great material that we've buried there. Seems like a laudable goal here. All right, 5G. 5G is going off in lots of different directions. People think about it just as speed, but it's much more than speed. So there's lots of different aspects of 5G. It helps with our durability, our capacity. It's recreating human interface, dimensionality. So with 5G, it's stimulating the entrepreneurial world in a big way. 5G actually adds huge amounts of computing power at the edge of the distributed networks. So when we're talking back and forth to our devices, like Alexa, and we're going to ask it weird things in the future, like, Alexa, what kind of beer am I in the mood for? But when we're talking back and forth to these devices, we're actually building the brains of the robot. So the more we use it, the smarter it's going to get. Over time, the robot that it's connected to might be a driverless car, it might be an actual robot, it might be a drone, but it's going to get much smarter as we go. So the Internet of Things world is taking off like a rocket here. It's touching our lives in lots of different ways. And it's enabling us to create smart cities. Now, smart cities mean different things to different people. And what we think of as a smart city today is going to be vastly different than what we think of as a smart city 10 years from now. This is hugely important to keep in mind as we're moving forward. Now, we're trying to basically connect everything in the physical world to the digital world. And that's where we're coming up with these ingenious new devices for doing things. In January at the Consumer Electronics Show, I ran into this company that was making smart pants. And I thought, wow, this is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But then I realized how it worked. And if you're walking down the road and you're supposed to turn right, it'll buzz on your right side. If you're supposed to turn left, it'll buzz on your left side. So everywhere you go, you have a little GPS in your pants. L'Oreal is making this hairbrush that as you brush it through your hair, it listens to the sound that the bristles make on the hair as it goes through your hair, and it can tell if you have dry hair, cracked, split ends, and it will actually recommend different shampoos and conditioners for you. Baidu is making smart chopsticks to tell you if your food is safe to eat. The pepper projector, this thing's really cool. It works as a regular salt and pepper shaker, but as you sit down to eat, it'll scan your plate of food. It'll tell you how much you weigh before you eat it and how much you're going to weigh afterwards. The biometric coffee maker, this thing's really smart. You get up in the morning, you put your hand on it, it knows exactly how much caffeine should go in your coffee. We think it should also have a Jack Daniel's switch on it, but. The IC Pooch, this is really cool because you can be working in your office, you have a pet at home, you can remotely dispense food for your pet, and then you can FaceTime them. So if you have pets at home and you're not FaceTiming them today, then, well, shame on you. This is a really cool device. This is a VR helmet for chickens. So naturally, it begs the question that if the chicken thinks it's a free-range chicken, is it? And this device here is for medical students. We're not sure exactly what this is used for, but since there's an eye chart on the wall, we think it's designed to improve their hindsight. So my prediction is that 10% of the world's population will be wearing clothing connected to the internet by 2022. That's just right around the corner here. And that this is going to open the door for tons of micro-industries. IoT smart building installers, smart clothing developers, health monitors, proximity alert systems, and just so much more. As my favorite physicist, Max Planck, likes to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. All right, cryptocurrencies and blockchain. We hear a lot about this right now. It all started in 2007, 2008. People really started to hate the banking industry because of the recession. There's a few people on Wall Street got us into deep trouble. And out of the middle of that, our mysterious gentleman, Satoshi Nakamoto, created Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, nobody really paid much attention to it for the first couple of years. Started in January of 2009. It's an anonymous cryptocurrency. It's not really anonymous, though, but it's mined into existence as national monies are actually loaned into existence. They had to figure out a way to create some scarcity, so they're having it mined into existence. So there's some key design features around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. It's open so that everybody can participate in it. It's borderless. There's no one country controls it. It's decentralized, it's neutral, and it's censorship resistant. Now, the reason Bitcoin just has recently taken off is there's some speculation. There's a committee in India that has suddenly decided to call all cryptocurrency a Ponzi scheme, and they said that we should have nothing to do with it in India. And so because of that, lots of people in India have been investing in it. This is what's known as the Streisand effect, because a few years ago, Barbara Streisand tried to get all the photos taken down of her house in Malibu, which is really kind of a plush place, and it had just the opposite effect. And so that might be part of the reason why this is the value is going up so much. Now, is embracing Bitcoin the equivalent of embracing the ARPANET-like web in the 1970s and 80s? That's what it seems like. We don't really know all the things that we need to know about cryptocurrency just yet. So assuming there will be some universal global currency, will it be something like Bitcoin? Maybe. So a Bitcoin economy, Bitcoin goes up to $10,000. It's a $210 billion economy, and it's a little bit above that right now. If it goes up to $1 million a coin, that's a $21 trillion economy. Is that enough for a global currency? Maybe. So people like Christine Lagarde, when she talks about, she's the head of the IMF. When she talks about this, she says things like, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency could displace central banks, conventional banking, and challenge the monopolies of national monies. But she also goes on to say that it's inevitable that cryptocurrencies will need to be regulated by governments. The disconnect there is she doesn't know how that can actually happen. So what's been going on in the background is as the value of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies creep up, that gives the software developers the incentive to start building other platforms, other utilities that can actually work with it. And so we're seeing this escalation, this exponential growth in additional pieces of software to work with it. Now, there's a lot of challenges with cryptocurrency. There's no real legal system. If somebody steals your Bitcoin or your Monero or something, where do you go to report that? You go down to the police station and tell them that somebody stole your cryptocurrency? Good luck with that one. There's no dependent constituency. So national currencies have a responsibility to help improve the economy of a local country. Since all cryptocurrencies are global in nature, there's no constituency, so there's no direct relationship with people of the world. So there's no overall economic responsibility. So coexistence is really the key. So there's a number of companies that are starting to get ready to launch their own cryptocurrency. And the one that we're hearing the most about right now is Facebook. Facebook with their Libra, which is going to be coming out very soon here. And there's a lot of huge financial backers in the background here. Is this going to catch on? Is this going to overtake Bitcoin as the kind of the standard bearer for the cryptocurrency world? We'll see. Genesis Capital has actually been giving out loans in Bitcoin. They did $1.1 billion in loans in 2018. So you want to buy a house, and rather than use US dollars, maybe you can buy a house and get a loan in Bitcoin. So lots of interesting stuff happening in the banking world. So we can sit back and say, well, you know, within 5 years, mobile devices will replace credit cards, they'll replace debit cards, wallets, lenders, brokers, insurance agents, money transfers abroad, all of that. Or will they? And then what percentage of that's going to be controlled by the current banking system? See, over in China right now, WeChat Pay has become the tool of choice for making payments. They don't use cash in the major cities in China right now. If somebody's doing a street performance and they want to get tips, then they will put up a QR code out front and people will send them a little money through their phone. So There's actually over 30 debit cards now that work with Bitcoin, including this Visa one that I have pictured here. So are we moving to a world where we have currency agnostic debit cards so we can load whatever currency we have onto them and then just spend them like regular money on Amazon or in Walmart or wherever we're going? So my prediction is that by 2030, over 25% of national currencies will be converted to some form of cryptocurrency, just because it's a much more efficient way of doing things. And this is going to give rise to tons of micro industries, cryptocurrency banks, insurance companies, loans and mortgage companies, coaches, advisors, and much more. All right, shifting gears here, flying drones. Every time we add a new feature to a drone, it gives it additional capabilities. So what additional capabilities do we have on a drone if we add speakers to it, or microphones, or infrared filters, or sensors? How about robotic arms? What can we do with a drone with robotic arms? How about lasers? If we put wheels on it, we can roll it on the ground as well as fly in the sky. How about tow lines? This is a video of somebody using a drone to tow them water skiing. Looks like fun, doesn't it? Every year there's a Halloween, prime time for drones. Emergency rescue drones are this is a real hot topic because we have the ability to eliminate forest fires completely. I mean, we can have drones that are flying over any area of the mountains and the plains. We can, anytime we spot a hot spot, rather than letting it turn into a 1,000-acre blaze, it's much easier to put out a fire when it's very small. And so we can, when we spot something that's very small, then we can send in a fire extinguisher drone to put it out. Naturally, there's pluses and minuses to doing this. In the future, we're going to be using sound waves to put out fires. Every time somebody calls in with a 911 call to a city, the city's first response will be to get eyes on it, to understand what they're dealing with. And then they can formulate the right response. When we have avalanche problems in the mountains here, rather than sending people in harm's way, we can actually send drones out there and have them do thermal scans of the snow to find out where the people are at. There's going to be a lot of competition between the news organization to try to be first to get live coverage of any incident in a city, whatever that might be. Naturally, we all need beer drones, emergency beer drones. It's much easier to fly a drone up to inspect the top of a windmill rather than to put people up there. It's much easier to use drones to inspect power lines, to put in dangerous places rather than put people in harm's way, to do thermal scans on buildings, to monitor construction of buildings 1,000 miles away. And we're quickly moving from one-off drones to fleets of drones. So rather than this kind of hobbyist era that we're in right now, we're going to be moving into fleets of drones, and every police department, every city will have their own fleet of drones, every college campus, every airport, farmers will have their own fleets of drones, news organizations. That will give rise to drone command centers. These drone command centers will start cropping up in cities. We don't know exactly what they'll look like. Have some idea that they might look something like this, but who knows? And what skills do you need to work in a drone command center? That still needs to be defined. So much of the drone world is virgin territory. If we assume that someday there will be 50,000 drones flying over every major city, in not too many years, that'll be happening in Denver for sure, then what's the role and responsibility of the city for managing all those drones? And you can imagine that if somebody's going to start complaining about drones, the complaints will first go to the city. And then what's the legal privacy networks, barriers that we need to put in place? So who has the right to shoot a drone out of the air? More importantly, when do we have an obligation to shoot a drone out of the air? How do we determine if this drone is being menacing or causing problems? See, this is a picture of a drone that's actually burning trash off of a power line. But how do we know that that's just burning trash or whether it's trying to cut through the power line altogether? And who gets to make that decision? Again, these are things that haven't been discussed, that we haven't had any policy set up for things like this. And does the right to bear arms also give us the right to own drones that are armed? Cities and counties are going to start employing these fleets of drones, and they're going to scan the cities, and over time we're going to start creating digital models of these cities, and they're going to get higher and higher resolution. We'll get better models over time, and this will give rise to what I refer to as search engines for the physical world. Now, with search engines for the physical world, we can actually search on attributes that we have no idea that will be searchable in the future. I want something that smells like this or tastes like this. I want something with this harmonic vibration, with this specific gravity, with this texture, with this level of reflectivity. We'll be able to search on all of those things in the future. We won't have to know how it does it. We'll just have to put the right query in, and we'll be able to search on things like, where is that dog with rabies right now? Or we can do stalker reports. How close did John Doe get to Jane Doe yesterday? Or infrastructure reports. What's the most dangerous bridge in the city today? Over time, drones are going to enter our lives in all kinds of different ways, including being able to fly across the city and being able to fly up into the mountains, weather permitting, naturally. This is a quick video of one that Airbus is working on right now. Looks like fun, doesn't it? So as these drone taxis start taking off, and there's several companies working on this right now, including Boeing and Airbus and a few others, this will give rise to mini airports. Now, I like to think of mini airports about the size of a parking lot for a grocery store, as we have these landing pads, and we have to have multiple landing pads, and we have to have some sort of a little terminal building for people to come and go to. These are going to start springing up in cities. Some of them will be on top of buildings, some of them will be on the ground. But what these look like is still unfamiliar territory, but this is coming sooner than later. Uber is pushing the envelope on this. And they're trying to do a lot of stuff in India just because the traffic is so terrible in India. So my prediction is that search engines for the physical world will become common by 2028, and that we're going to reach the first billion drones in the world by 2030. That's a lot of drones. And drone taxis will be a common form of transportation by 2030. And this is going to give rise to tons of micro-industries: drone agriculture scanners, maintenance companies, rescue services, taxi services, and so much more. All right, driverless technology. So I'd like to remind people that the cars we drive today have actually been in development for over 120 years. So it's taken that long to get to cars that are this good. So for the past 120 years, people designing those cars have been focused on one central function, which is driving. What the human relationship is with the dashboard, with the steering wheel. But as we move into the driverless era, people will no longer drive. And so all of this body of work that was done understanding human anthropometrics, the size and relationship of humans to these vehicles, goes out the window. So naturally, we have to ask the question, is a car designer, the job of a car designer, is that the same job? Because they're focused on something real different. This is a real important question because 20 years from now, we're still going to have nurses, we're going to have doctors, we're going to have lawyers, we're going to have teachers. All of these jobs are going to require different tools. So then you have to ask the question, is this the same job? So I wrote a column a few months back on 128 things that will disappear in the driverless car era. This is what it's like in a driverless car today as we're driving around. You can see the guy on the left with his hands on his pants, the real nervous guy there. This brings up a real important point because we have to develop a level of trust before we VW is actually working on anti-vomit technology for driverless cars. One of the missing pieces is Wi-Fi or connectedness everywhere. See, some of the decisions are made in the car itself, some of the decisions are made in the cloud. So we have all of these vehicles that need to talk to each other. If a car driving through the mountains hits a deer, and that car is just a little bit in front of me, I need to know about it in my car right away. Now, there's all kinds of shadowing problems in the mountains right now with the signals, so somehow that latency period becomes very critical. If it takes 10 seconds to go up to a satellite and come back down to me, that's way too long. If it takes 1/10 of a second, that might be about right. So Elon Musk with his Starlink system, they're shooting up supposedly 12,000 satellites into space to give internet coverage for everywhere on planet Earth. There's actually several competing systems for this. Samsung is wanting to do something similar. So is Amazon, and there's a couple other competing companies as well. So think of cars as rolling data centers. Each of these will have tons and tons of information coming and going from it. Now, as we move into the driverless era, very likely we're going to stop buying our own cars. That doesn't mean everybody, but it's hard to kind of rationalize how this is going to work out because people in the big cities will likely not own their own cars. People in rural areas will probably still have to buy theirs. So 86% of the cars on the road today have just one person in them. And so it's very likely that the people who own fleets of cars are just going to design cars around one person to keep their costs down. Very likely we'll create queuing stations for buildings rather than parking lots, so we'll have lots of cars coming and going. That means a lot of architectural stuff, redesign of the entrances of buildings. Looks like electric cars are going to dominate. There is a big effort for hydrogen, but I think the electric will still dominate. Driverless highways, we're going to have highways that are designated as driverless only sometime between 2030 and 2035. That means you can only pull your car on them if you can switch it into a driverless mode. What this means is that all the cars on this road can drive much closer together, side by side, front and back, and they can go much faster. 140, 160 miles an hour. Think of it as the American Autobahn wherever you're going. The life expectancy of autonomous vehicles is going to be much shorter. If you have a car that's picking up people and dropping them off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you could put on as many as 1,000 miles in a single day. It may be less than that, but if you're doing 1,000 miles in a single day, that means in 10 months you have 300,000 miles on this one car. That's going to show lots of wear and tear. We don't know what the life expectancy of these vehicles will be, But so one autonomous vehicle will replace 30 traditional cars. That's the way it's estimated out right now. We have 1,400 autonomous cars being tested in the United States today by 80 different companies. That's a whole lot of testing going on. Lots of investment in the autonomous world. It affects so many different areas, like the average airport in the United States, 41% of the revenue comes from parking and transportation services. Very likely all of this disappears over the coming decades here. We have lots of consequences for distracted driving. Roughly 38,000 deaths a year, 4.4 million injuries. And here's the big number. We're spending right at $500 billion repairing people every year after car accidents. $500 billion a year. That's one out of every $6 in the healthcare industry. Lots of the money cities are depending on for car sales. Somewhere in the 20 to 40% range is what cities expect coming in from car sales. Now, if I own a fleet of cars, I'm going to buy that fleet of cars where I can get them the cheapest. I'm not going to pay the most money I could possibly pay for it, so I might buy them in Wyoming and bring them down here because I can save a lot of money. This means that over time, all of the traffic courts, the traffic cops, all of that goes away. In the city of Westminster, down in Denver, city of Westminster, the city manager says that 80% of all the police force is dedicated to traffic control. All of that goes away over the next couple decades here. In 2015, New York City brought in $1.9 billion from traffic violations. There's a whole lot of bad karma in that number right there. Cities are going to lose over 50% of their current revenue streams. Just the retail alone, over 10% of retail has to do with cars. All the parts stores, the tire shops, the brake shops, the car washes, the dealerships themselves, the gas stations, all of these things start to disappear over time. Teenagers will be the early adopters of driverless cars, and parents are actually going to prefer it. But with teenagers, things go wrong. I mean, how can anything go wrong with teenagers? At what age can a child drive in a driverless car by themselves? This is an interesting question because we haven't had any discussions around this. If I design a system that will recognize a teacher on one end and a parent on the other end, can I send a 6-year-old child to school by themselves in a driverless car, and for how long? Is 10 minutes okay? Is 30 minutes too long? I mean, things go wrong. The retail world is going to get redefined by driverless. Just last year, we reached 10% e-commerce. That means 10% of all the retail takes place online. But over the coming years, as we move into mobile devices that drive themselves, we can have mobile storefronts. And this changes the way we think about the retail world. If you're at home at night and you need to get something from the store, rather than to get dressed and go to the store, you can just summon the convenience store to come to you. You go out in your pajamas, you pick out what you want. There's no clerks there or anything. You just pick out what you need, it charges you for it, and you go back to bed. This is a radically different way of doing things. In the future, our office might be in a mobile office. We drive around town, it drives itself, picks up all the people for your meetings, and then you could have the meetings on the go and then drop people off when the meeting is over. We can have driverless cooking schools, we can have driverless hair shops, we can have dog grooming places, mobile banks, mobile bike repair, bike rental, mobile nail shops and hair shops, coffee shops, and the retail will actually be a combination of things that you can buy inside the vehicle or you set up outside the vehicle. It's going to come in lots of shapes and sizes. Would you buy a pie from the pie minister? Maybe. Mobile bars. So the big difference is, rather than spending all this money to get people to come to you as a retail store, you go to where the people are. Anytime there's a gathering of people, anytime there's a softball tournament, a parade on Main Street, you can set up shop and suddenly start doing business. This is a radically different way of thinking about the business world. Mobile hotel rooms. I want to do a conference in some remote location. I can just summon 500 hotel rooms to show up. And the next week, they all go down to a conference down in New Orleans. This also applies to hospital beds. And very likely, FEMA will be working on dozens of these things that will show up whenever there's a disaster. The mall of the future will likely be a giant open warehouse that every morning they open the doors and all these driverless mobile businesses pull in and set up shop. And it's a different configurations of business every day, which will make it quite an interesting place to go to. The mobile food service world today is paving the way for a much larger industry. But the one thing that's missing is what I refer to as a geosmart cash register. Since we have all of these retail districts and we tend not to know what retail district we're in at any given moment, having a cash register that automatically knows itself, it's a geosmart cash register, so it will actually deduct the right amount of sales tax in the transaction and then remit micropayments to each of the taxing authorities with every transaction. So my prediction is that driverless technology will be the most disruptive technology in all history. It'll be more disruptive than the invention of the wheel, the invention of electricity, the invention of the car itself, most likely because it will affect more people on planet Earth than any other, in a shorter period of time than any other technology in all history. This will pave the way for tons of micro-industries, driverless delivery services, retail storefronts, medical services, gaming salons, just so much more. This is what an intersection looks like in the driverless world. It's kind of mesmerizing, isn't it? All right, 3D printing and contour crafting. This guy, Lee Cronin, is a professor at Glasgow University. He thinks that very soon we're going to be able to 3D print all of our pharmaceutical drugs, all of our pills in the future. He thinks that we will be able to take everything that we're taking today, combine it into a single pill at proper dosage, and just print that out every morning. I can't wait for that to happen, actually. So in the past, we've seen 3D printed prosthetic limbs, and they were pretty crude. Now they're getting much more sophisticated. We can actually 3D print 150 prosthetic eyes in an hour. This is a big hit over Halloween, naturally. We're able to print with living tissue, and it's not quite ready for prime time just yet, but we're getting really, really close, including organs like printing hearts. They have working blood vessels in them. Again, we're not quite ready for prime time. They're still doing testing on it, but very soon here. I like to ask the question of how long will it be before I can 3D print a replacement body for myself? Something that maybe 18, 20 years old, better looking, more hair in his head. Is this the world we're moving into here? I think I'll wear the head with the big smile today because it just seems right. This is a house that was printed last January in Russia. It's a house that is roughly cost $10,000, printed in less than a day. 400 square foot house is not very big, but it was printed in the middle of winter. Again, less than a day to do all this. Now this is opening the door for lots of other things. There's an Italian architect who thinks that in the future we're going to be able to design our own units on the ground and then have them printed on top of the building and then slid into place. Is that how we're going to create our high-rise buildings in the future? Well, maybe. But this is what a lot of people are thinking, that we'll have a construction site for a home and we'll set up a rig around it and we will 3D print our entire house in less than a day. Now, as the technology gets better, we're not just printing the structure, we're also printing the wiring in the walls, the plumbing in the walls. We're printing the insulation, the cabinets in the kitchen, the sinks, the toilets, even the windows. And as this improves, if we get tired of our house, all we have to do is just grind it up and reprint it. We don't even have to clean it first. We can just get rid of it. Once we're able to 3D print our walls, we no longer have the need for flat walls. Every wall can become an artistic centerpiece. Architects are going to go crazy with this because they can create free-form structures unlike anything that we can produce today. And our very definition of what a house is, what a condo is, what an office is going to change as we have access to this kind of technology. So how long before 3D printing becomes a better option? These are some that are being 3D printed for homeless people in disaster areas. In Amsterdam, they 3D printed a bridge out of stainless steel. And so in the very near future, we'll be able to 3D print thousands of different materials as we run them through these machines. This will open the door for 3D printed buildings, clothing, furniture, pharmaceuticals, just so much more. As William Gibson says, the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So artificial intelligence will be affecting so many aspects of our lives, and I'm going to focus specifically on the education world here. In 2012, I was giving a talk in Istanbul at the TEDx event on teacherless education. And afterwards, one of the executives from Google came up to me and says, we're very interested in teacherless education because we want to educate Africa and teachers don't want to go to Africa. Now, this was a very revealing moment for me because no, teachers don't want to go to Africa. They don't want to go to Siberia, Pakistan. There's lots of places that teachers don't want to go. In fact, we have a global teacher shortage of 18 million teachers, and a full 23% of all kids growing up in the world today don't go to any school whatsoever. And if we continue to have to insert a teacher between us and everything we need to know in the future, we can't possibly stay relevant in the world ahead. So the role of education is changing. It's no longer possible to anticipate the needs of education of business 4 to 5 years in advance. So we're currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist, using technology that hasn't been invented to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. The average person entering the workforce in 2030 had better plan to reboot their career 8 to 10 times throughout their working life. So somebody who has to shift gears this often will want to do the retraining in the least amount of time, not the most, which makes traditional colleges a poor fit for that. If you think about when Facebook bought Oculus Rift in 2014, they paid $2 billion for it. There was this instant uptick in the demand for virtual reality designers, experience creators, coders, and nobody was teaching that. Certainly they weren't teaching the Oculus Rift version. So this has given rise to micro colleges. This is something that we were exploring at the Da Vinci Institute. We spent a lot of time working with people who wanted to enter the coding world. So we created Da Vinci Coders, and we were giving people this 13, 14-week coding course so that they can get a foothold into the coding world. A micro college, the way I define it, is just an immersive form of post-secondary education done in a short period of time. This was one of our classes that we had, and at the end, people would get a certificate and be ready to enter the workforce then. So think of micro colleges as going off in thousands of different directions. Cybersecurity experts, 3D printers, training centers to teach people how to design parts for 3D printers, how to become crowdfunding experts, even dog breeders or brewmasters for brew pubs, drone pilot schools. But we're on the brink of a revolution here with AI. All of this technology has been brewing for decades. It's been worked on in universities and labs literally for decades, and it's all kind of converging right now. It's coming together. Lots of things are happening. Some of the early adopters here, healthcare, energy, driverless technology, Internet of Things. But I had this big idea. It occurred to me one night that, and I heard this story about how Google bought this company called DeepMind. It was a British company, an AI company. And after they gave it very few instructions for playing this game of Breakout. They wanted it to just maximize the score. Now, Breakout is a game of Pong, a sophisticated game of Pong. So after 30 minutes, this is what it looked like. It was still losing a lot. It was still learning. After 2 hours, it had mastered the game, though. Figured out how to play it at a high rate of speed. So this is what that looked like. And then after 4 hours, it figured out the optimal strategy. It figured out how to play the game in a way that even the designers of the game didn't know how it was possible to shoot a ball around the outside there. And this is what that looked like. So then they decided to try DeepMind on 49 other Atari 2600 games, and in each case, it figured out how to master that game. So it occurred to me that if we apply AI to a teacher bot, the new game becomes, how do we teach this individual student faster and faster and faster? Over time, the AI will learn that student's idiosyncrasies, each of their proclivities, their preferred reference tools. It will learn everything about them and how to keep them engaged, even though there's a lot of distractions. It'll learn what skills they're deficient in, what needs to bring them up to speed, and how and when to schedule their training. So it'll know when things are working, when things are not working. And over time, it will learn how to teach them faster and faster, 2 times faster, 4 times faster, maybe even 10 times faster. The idea of being able to learn an entire college degree in 1 month might be possible. So my prediction is that by 2030, the largest company on the internet will be an education-based company that we haven't heard of yet. This will be bigger than Apple, Facebook, Google. Once somebody cracks the code, it will scale very quickly. This will open the door for tons of other things too. AI-enhanced human app builders, training systems for businesses, traffic control systems, warning systems, and just so much more. So the future is ours to write. Always remember, the future is never a destination, it's always a journey. It's always changing. By 2030, the average person will own printed clothing, live in a printed house, have packages delivered by drones, own more than one robot, work as a freelancer, frequently use driverless cars, and will be capable of accomplishing at least 10 times as much as the average person today. We're entering a period of unprecedented opportunity. So why is this so important? Because humanity is going to change more in the next 20 years than in all human history. But at the same time, we're creating far more breaking points, things that can go wrong. And the risk factors are going to increase exponentially. And our children's children who haven't even been born yet, they're counting on you. They're counting on the people in this room to make great decisions. As Steve Jobs says, right now is one of those moments when you are influencing the future. But sometimes our best efforts just look a lot like this. Yeah, pretty much just like that. So any of you that are interested, I brought a few copies of my book, Epiphany Z. They'll be for sale for $20, and the money goes to our scholarship fund at the Da Vinci Institute. And any of you that would like to get more information, you can sign up for our free newsletter. And I thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.